Good morning, class. Now, quickly sit down, shut up, because today's lesson is about ambiguity in cinema. Basically, it's generally a good thing, but there's a fine line between it and just leaving your audience in the dark. Particularly when we're talking about the blockbuster arena, the audience typically wants to know what's going on without having to figure it out for themselves. Case in point, we have these 10 movies. Now, most of them released to solid acclaim from critics, but each is also guilty of leaving an unresolved plot point to linger in its viewers' heads. Now, some are just basic lapses in logic, some are crucial character shading, but both would have lent vital context to their stories. And we know that because the film's creators literally wrote those scenes into the movie, but for whatever reason, they never made it to the screen. Thankfully though, it's 2019, so the internet still managed to catch them. My name is Adam Cleary, and these are 10 deleted scenes which resolve baffling movie mysteries. Number 10. Why was Superman accused of murder in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice? Alright, so cast your minds back to the opening scene in this film where Supes, played by Henry Cavill, rescues Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, from a warlord in Africa. The Man of Steel is subsequently blamed for the slaughter of a nearby village, despite the fact that the victims were shot, which is clearly the furthest thing possible from Superman's MO. It just sort of makes no sense whatsoever that the general public would turn on Superman in light of such obviously contradictory evidence. However, Zack Snyder's Ultimate Edition of the movie is a solid, if bloated, improvement on the whole, and restores an extended version of the scene where it's revealed that the slain villagers' corpses were burned with a flamethrower by Anatoly Kanyazev. This neatly explains why Superman was believed to be behind the killings, with the fire damage presumably being a result of his heat vision. You can argue that a simple autopsy would probably still reveal that the bodies were riddled with gunshots, but it nevertheless sews up one of the movie's early gaps in logic. Number 9. What was the Giant's original purpose in The Iron Giant? The precise origins and applications of the titular amnesiac robot are kept rather mysterious throughout Brad Bird's gorgeous animated classic. Thus, it's an enigma that's hounded fans ever since. We know that he crashes to Earth in 1957, but beyond that, his origins are a mystery. However, the 2015 signature edition of the movie saw the completion of an additional scene Bird had wanted to include. In it, the Giant has a nightmare of his past in Dean's junkyard, which is then transmitted onto a nearby TV. The dream shows that the Giant was just one of an army of other giants. And given that they're seen stalking through a post-apocalyptic landscape and we catch glimpses of a planet literally exploding, it's safe to assume that our friendly giant has probably caused his fair share of murder and destruction in the past. The scene clearly exists to underline Dean's famous quote of "You are who you choose to be." However, some fans understandably prefer the Giant's origins to be left ambiguous. Number 8. Why does the T-800 have an Austrian accent in all of the Terminator films? Yeah, so what exactly is the reason behind a murderous T-800 robot having a very pronounced European accent? I mean, for a machine that is designed to infiltrate, it immediately sticks out, especially in California of all places. Well, Terminator 3 made a goofy but somewhat amusing attempt to address this logical lapse. In an infamous but obviously deleted scene, it reveals that the original human likeness on which the T-800 was based was a man called Sergeant William Candy. Now yes, as you can see, he was still played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, but his voice was dubbed over the top with a stereotypical Southern American accent. After a CRS stuffed shirt mentions that he doesn't really dig the accent, another officer tells him, "We can fix it," and this officer just happens to sound like this. It's a cute deleted scene that explains a bizarre facet of Schwarzenegger's casting in such a role, even if it's easy to see why director Jonathan Mostow cut it from the final movie. Number 7. Why did Soren make a random joke about Geordi's heart in Star Trek Generations? Later on in the 7th Star Trek film, which is actually good by the way, the villainous Soren is asked by the Klingons whether or not his interrogation of Geordi LaForge was successful. Soren retorts, "No, his heart just wasn't in it." A peculiar and clearly quite specific line which the audience has zero frame of reference for. Even the Duras sisters are looking at him, asking what the hell does that mean? Well, this incredibly rough deleted scene depicts Soren torturing Geordi using an especially brutal method he learned from the Borg, placing a nanoprobe in Geordi's chest and constantly stopping and starting his heart in the hope of getting answers. And with that, Soren's quip makes total sense. Total horrifying sense. I mean, it does sort of make you wonder why the Borg would ever need to torture somebody when they could simply assimilate you and learn the knowledge that way, but that's another question entirely. Number 6. How did Indy know not to look at the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Steven Spielberg's action-adventure classic memorably concludes with the Nazis opening the Ark of the Covenant, after which they all get their comeuppance with a yep, some of this, and then that happens to him, and it's all just very horrifying. But Indy and Marion are spared. This is because, at Indy's behest, they keep their eyes closed and never physically see the Ark in action. So, how did he know to do that? Though there are a few mild hints throughout the film, which Indy may have picked up on, namely drawings of men carrying the Ark while blindfolded, a deleted scene flat out explains this to his face. His pal Imam explains that touching the Ark or looking at it while opened will result in instant death. Sadly, the scene has never been officially released, but a few rare snaps have been unearthed on social media in recent times. Look, there's one, you see, problem solved. Number 5, what happened to Malcolm in War for the Planet of the Apes? Now, just to recap slightly here, the previous film, Dawn for the Planet of the Apes, ends with human Malcolm and his family taking leave of Caesar, who is, if you recall, prepping for an all-out war with the human military. Malcolm's fate is just never addressed in the third and maybe final entry in the series, leaving fans to ponder what became of him. Now you see, a brilliantly acted and deliciously intense deleted scene reveals that Malcolm actually ended up crossing paths with Woody Harrelson's Colonel. In it, we're given the explanation that Malcolm tried to convince the Colonel to seek out Caesar to find a diplomatic solution. But of course, the Colonel simply shot Malcolm dead, and that's that. I mean, you can see why they cut this, because in many ways it's an extremely unsatisfying ending for a brilliant character, and it is a bit of a stretch to believe they would have ever actually met. But saying that, given that it was never released, it's also not officially a part of the canon, so if you want to reject it, you're absolutely free to. Number 4, where did Henry's other friends go in it? Yeah, this one always bothered me actually. Bully Henry Bowers is the leader of the so-called Bowers gang in Stephen King's It. This gang includes his 3 pals Patrick, Belch, and Vic. But after Patrick is killed by Pennywise and Henry is subsequently driven insane by him, neither Belch nor Vic are ever heard from again. So, what the hell? Well, a brief deleted scene reveals their rather gnarly fates. As moments before Henry plots to kill the losers, we see him sat in a car covered in blood with the corpses of his 2 pals sat next to him. Just gonna quickly double check this, and yes, their throats are cut, they're absolutely dead, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's happened here. Yeah, apparently this is where the director chose to draw the line in this film and not at the dismemberment of a small child, so there you go. Number 3. Who was Rob talking to on the phone in High Fidelity? Ah yes, in the now iconic rom-com, protagonist Rob Gordon is shown taking one of his many phone calls throughout the movie. Now they all tend to have some sort of basic or dramatic payoff, but there is one distinctive call he takes inside his record store that just happens. Rob indicates interest in something, and then this narrative through line is just dropped completely. So, who was the caller, and what were they offering? Well, this has to be one of the more satisfying and memorable answers on this list, and it's a deleted scene which absolutely positively should have stayed in the final cut. After taking the call, Rob visits a married woman who wants to sell her husband's incredibly expensive record collection for a mere $50. She just found out he'd been cheating on her with an 18-year-old girl, so yeah, fair enough. Rob's conscience, though, forces him to offer her a far greater sum, resulting in a hilarious game of reverse haggling as the wife tries to keep the price low. Rob ultimately decides not to go ahead with the deal, placing a wholesome capper on a hysterical sequence, which adds a ton of charm to a movie already overflowing with it. Number 2, why did Thor visit a cave in Avengers Age of Ultron? Yeah, you knew this one was coming. There is an incredibly bizarre and ambiguous scene in Avengers Age of Ultron where Thor visits a cave with Dr. Selvig. Now yes, he does say something about, I need to seek answers, and not finding them here, and water spirit something, but still, we're not really given an explanation. Thor just sort of takes his top off, gets into a pool, and experiences a vision of an extinction event on Earth. He sees the stones, he sees the gauntlet, there's maybe a hint of Thanos, and that's just about it. Well, if you really want answers, then an extremely silly scene that understandably hit the cutting room floor sort of explains that he enters the pool in order to be embodied by Norn. Who, I hear you ask? Well, she's a goddess of destiny who Selvig then grills about the means through which to stop Ultron. Even though the deleted scene sheds more light on an extremely fleeting and incoherent beat in the theatrical cut, it is still dangerously close to absolute nonsense. In a movie that was already 141 minutes long, it is a fully understandable omission. Number 1. What happened to Allison's boyfriend in Halloween? Yeah, if you've not seen it, the new Halloween sequel features one especially aggravating loose end. Beyond, no, I'm not even talking about Michael Myers just disappearing at the end, it's the unresolved fate of Allison's boyfriend Cameron. Midway through the movie, he's caught cheating on her at a party, and it feels like David Gordon Green is setting the character up for a brutally violent and thoroughly deserved death later on. But it just never comes, and he's never seen again. So what actually happened to Cameron? Disappointingly, Green didn't even bother to shoot a death scene for Cam. But crucially, he did go to the effort of filming a follow-up, which shows what happened to him after the party. After 2 cops tell Cam and Allison to go home, Cam's belligerence gets him arrested and just shoved in the back of a squad car. Doesn't even die. Short of him getting his comeuppance in the inevitable sequel, this just felt like a huge waste of a potentially awesome death scene. I mean, he definitely deserved it, didn't he? At least more than Vicky did anyway. So yes, there you have it. Those are 10 deleted scenes which resolve baffling movie mysteries. Stay tuned for the 11th entry, which explains why I bothered to do it in the first place. Let us know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I have of course been Adam Cleary, and I'll see you soon.